Oh, I think we're ready to start. Good afternoon, members. Welcome to this meeting of the Standards Committee. Welcome to the officers in attendance. You will be familiar with this pre-meeting announcement that meetings are not only being recorded, but they're also going to be published. And to that end, a gentle reminder to all members to remember, as I'm likely to forget, to use the button. Apologies. Thank you. Any other apologies? Thank you. Order of business?
Is this?
Any declarations of interest? Silence indicates assent. No declarations of interest. Can we therefore move to the minutes of the meeting of the 27th of March, which are on pages 3 to 19? Any comments? Can we adopt these as a correct record of the meeting? So adopted. Thank you. Now we move on to item 5, which you'll find at pages 21 to 23. Two seconds. Are you going to speak to this, Mr. Clifford? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. This report invites Standards Committee to consider any training needs that require to be met, and in particular to consider the possibility of hosting a Standards Commission training session in late November or early December this year. The terms of reference of the Standards Committee are set out in section 2.1, in particular the areas relating to training. And at our last meeting on the 27th of March this year, the committee considered a report which invited it to consider how best to discharge this remit in relation to training. The agreement from that meeting set out in section 2.4 of the report. Following that meeting, an in-house training event for councillors on ethical standards was held on Tuesday the 30th of April. This included attendees from the Standards Commission and Public Standards Commissioner's Office. The Standards Commission now has a new Executive Director, Lindsay McNeill, who has met with the Chief Executive and the Legal and Secretariat Manager and myself, and she's very keen to conduct more training events across all local authorities in Scotland. She would be happy to work with us on delivering further training for Midlothian, either on our own or with some of our neighbouring councils, and has been looking for possible dates to take that forward. It's thought that perhaps late November or early December might be a possibility, and it's remitted to the officials it's suggested that it be remitted to the officials to liaise with the Commission to pursue this joint training event. Committee is invited to consider this matter.
Any comments or questions on the report, first of all?
No, just to say, Chair, the idea of a training event involving other councils makes sense. I know that, when I think previously the Standards Committee had held an event in the Borders, or an event was held in the Borders jointly between ourselves and Borders Council, and I think it was fairly well attended. And I think when we're talking about a relatively smaller amount of councillors, it's helpful to conduct these things on a joint basis. So that makes sense to hold it like that,
I see nods of assent to that, yes. So the objective of seeking to have that event as a joint event is agreed in principle. Really, it's a question of whether we can tie down some appropriate practical arrangements.
So it was just to say the other recommendations that are there is we're looking for, if possible, some guidance on the desired focus of this training, and to consider whether there's any additional training needs that need to be met as well.
So can we then address that? Any thoughts on this?
Can I ask a question? Did we not do some kind of circular to councillors for them to indicate areas that they would want to be trained in prior to or just after the election? Could we maybe get some feedback on that? That would be helpful to have that kind of information.
I'm not sure there was an awful lot of feedback from that. I think maybe Jim would be better placed to answer that question, but it wasn't as far back as the last election, but certainly when we were previously discussing possible topics for training, there was a circular around all elected members at that time, is my recollection, and I think there was very limited feedback that you got from that. Maybe Jim would add to that.
Yes, Chair, that was a position. It was for the training event that was held on the 30th of April. Prior to that, the Standards Committee had asked us to check with members if they had anything, but the overall approach that was being discussed was they're all still fairly new, so let's have sort of fairly basic material for them.
That being so, would it be possible in the intervening period between now and checking with the other local authorities whether a joint venture is possible, would it be possible for members to feed into the process any ideas or thoughts they had on that matter, so that in light of their greater experience as members, particularly for the new members, they might be able to suggest topics? So that could be done informally amongst members.
Can I make a point on the training as well? I think, you know, we're talking there about there being a number of new councillors. There's also a fair number of older heads, if you like. And I did note that, you know, I've got a tendency to go along to the training events, even if maybe I've been to them before, just to see if there's any updated information. And the last one that we had, I think it was on judicial reviews. I found it was a 2-hour session, and by the time we got towards the end of it, we were getting to the bit where I would have expected the most up-to-date information to be given, and unfortunately the vast majority, if not everybody, had to leave at that point. I think we need to maybe be mindful of the fact that you know, if we've got a lot of councillors along there that have been here for a while, that we need to try to make sure that the most up-to-date information is actually given at that meeting, even if it's, you know, you're kind of getting it first. I don't know if anybody else had that opinion as well, but I certainly found that when we were getting to the bit where we were going to be discussing the really up-to-date information, the stuff that I was really there for, I ended up having to leave the thing after it went on more than 2 hours. So we just need to be aware of that kind of thing, get the balance right at these training events.
Yeah, I'd agree with Councillor Muirhead. I arranged the hearing on, well, the seminar on judicial review, and I think it did go on probably for too long, but perhaps the bits that members wanted to hear about should maybe have been dealt first. I also think judicial review is such a wide concept. It's actually quite difficult to distill that, you know, into a shorter time slot. That's why I think after that seminar, we're now looking at developing work-based sessions around planning, around liquor licensing and civic government licensing.
Chair, can I draw attention to recommendation 5A? We've been already advised by the Commission that East Lothian will be getting training from them just shortly. So they might not be particularly willing to have another session. And if we're going to go ahead late November, early December, our members quite happy for us just to run our own session, but we can make that available to anyone who wants to come along from, say, Scottish Borders or East Lothian, if we can't get any cohesion around dates.
That was my understanding of what we'd touched on at the beginning of the meeting. Let's see how far we can get in getting a joint session. But if that's not going to be possible, we'll proceed for the benefit of our own members. That's what your understanding was? Yep. Yeah. Have we exhausted this topic then? Have we got clear recommendations on all of the points? I think we have. Yes? Okay. So let's then move to item 6.
Thanks, Chair. This report to invite the committee to consider the terms of the proposed guidance on the use of council facilities during the pre-election period for forthcoming elections, in particular the European Parliamentary election in May 2014. On the 14th of May this year, Council considered a report on the guidance of use of council facilities by councillors, and this report stated the need for separate guidance to cover the pre-election period, and it was also suggested specifically that this guidance should incorporate a moratorium in the pre-election period on visits by politicians to council premises. Council agreed at that meeting to note the comments made regarding the need for this separate guidance and to remit back to the Standards Committee to consider the pre-election guidance, including that proposed moratorium. The pre-election guidance has now been reviewed and has been amended to include this proposal. It's now included at Appendix 1 and members are invited to consider its terms.
So if you can have reference to Appendix 1, any comments to make on that?
It's just the item on paragraph 3, the last paragraph there, saying that the purdah should not be known as that because it's inappropriate. So is it a decision we're taking as a council, or is that generally? It's paragraph 3 on page 33.
And your question again, sorry?
Are we not going to use this word anymore, or is this just a suggestion from us to the general?
Well, I would have thought that it's fairly self-explanatory. We're not going to use that word. It's been used informally, but has a very specific meaning in another context.
It makes mention through this paper quite a bit about candidates. I presume we're talking about politicians in general, MPs, MSPs, Euro MPs, or whatever. When we're talking about people not being able to come along to official events and things like that, or we're actually just talking about politicians in general, just to be clear on that, yeah.
So this would apply to the use of council premises in respect of any election. Yeah, that's the intention.
Just for a bit of clarity as well, we've been told relatively recently that it's okay, I think it's been discussed in here actually, that it's okay for us to refer to ourselves in our headed paper or in correspondence that we issue to people as Labour councillor for Midlothian South, SNP councillor for Dalkeith. I take it we don't have to change anything like that in the run-up to an election.
I don't think there's any need to do that. I mean, the guidance on the use of council facilities, which was recently approved, does give examples of the types of letterhead that should be used. And I think that the basic principle is if you're doing what you normally do, then that's fine. If you're concentrating on live constituency business, then that's appropriate, because it's quite clear that even in the run-up to election, you as a councillor do have to still continue to deal with constituency business, and it's appropriate to do that. But bearing in mind, obviously, that you can't use council resources for any party political campaigning or the like, but that would be the general point.
Just for my own information, at what point would that cease to pertain? At what point would a councillor be considered to be no longer a councillor?
In terms of legislation, it's actually there are council up until the day of polling.
So in light of what you said a minute ago, that would apply, your general advice there would apply up until polling day, and then after that it's fairly self-explanatory. Yeah? Any other comments?
Just wanted to clarify, the recommendation in the report here suggests that committee consider the terms of the draft guidance, and I suppose it's really just for committee to agree what happens with it next. Given the relative infrequency of the Standards Committee meetings, rather than wait for the minute of this meeting to be produced and to be formally approved by the next meeting of the Standards Committee, I wondered whether members might feel that this would be appropriate to take straight forward to Council to be approved or endorsed in that way.
Any objection to that? In which case, that's what will happen. Have we exhausted our discussion on this item? Thank you. Finally, date of next meeting. Do you want to project an actual date, or say maybe within a period of X number of months?
I think we usually remit it to yourself in consultation with the officers, normally 4 or 5 months down the line, something of that sort.
And what I've tended to do in consultation with the officers is call a meeting when we've got business, rather than simply have a meeting for meeting's sake. You agree with that practice? Okay. In which case, if there's no other business, can I thank you all very much indeed for your attendance, and now close the meeting. Thank you.